Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bible Show. Today, I'm going to be sharing a um, I think it's a very novel concept and idea to others, and I think sort of trying to make a connection to the 90s. I haven't quite made a clear connection to that sort of glorious time period that people often revere and very hold up very highly, but I think this is something I sort of realized very recently, just going through, um, just really going through and really taking a look at human satisfaction, taking a look at what it means to be satisfied, taking a look at what it means to be happy. And um, I'm not sure like where to really start off to touch off with this to touch. Um, I'm not sure where to start off here, but I guess I'll break it. I'll try to break it down into like just smaller points, and I'm just like some cold hard facts, in my opinion, and that's contradicting, and then we'll see what happens after that. So I'm gonna be diving into just um, some novel concepts into new people, and then I'm gonna combine it all together at the end. So we have this very fascinating dynamic in life. Um, with as well as with the personality types, we also have some aspects of nurture. We have subconscious, con, pardon me, subconscious develop and unconscious develop. And how we get these two different slants of the human soul is through nurture, actually, which is very interesting. How people become, so what is subconscious develop? Subconscious develop is sort of like you had an easy childhood and a relatively like easy, like tween years. Actually, I would say easy. You had an easy childhood. You were loved. Basically, got loved in your childhood. You got love in your childhood, and that produces subconscious developed people. And subconscious developed people, it's extremely interesting. They take on a different stance on their soul. Like if they're like ESTJ or INTP or whatever type, they take a different stance on their soul. There's like different. It's like they take on like a whole like a different side of feature. So imagine if anyone has ever watched Ben 10. Imagine it's an Omnitrix. You have access to 10 aliens, and another Omnitrix. There's two different Omnitrix. It's a red Omnitrix. 10 aliens for regular Omnitrix. But for the red Omnitrix, you get access. You get access to 10 evil versions, or just 10 dark versions of the 10 dark versions of the aliens. And so basically just the subconscious, unconscious develop. So with subconscious develop, you get like a set of a skill set, that sort of a specific mindset in life that helps, that sort of dictates your whole life. And I think it's almost impossible, as quoted by my mentor, to change your development unless you sort of have some sort of a traumatic brain trauma. And even then, I, to be honest, I don't have much faith in it happening. I'm actually very curious if it can happen because that is something that very much interests me. But I guess back to the main point. So subconscious developed people often very. I think a lot of people will say this, like from an idea from the collective unconscious is that they're very tribal. Um, the word we use in the C.S. Joseph community is credulous. They really take authority figures very, very seriously. On top of that, we have the flattery pole from sort of the INTJ side. And all subconscious developed types have all these different slants of like all these different traits because they were loved in their childhood. It gives them access to um, a lot of a lot of different traits, specific traits for subconscious develop. So credulity, flattery, object objectivity, objectifying people, and they're sort of but being subconscious develop how the mechanics works inside your soul is that it really you prioritize the top stack of your brain. So let's go say you're an INTP, you have TI, NE, SI, FE. You basically hyper focus on the top stack, the upper four, and you don't really have much focus on the lower four. And this produces very, I would say, balanced. I would say this produces very, this produces narrow without like, that's just the first word that came to mind, like narrow people. Um, but very balanced people because their their inferior function, their weakness function, isn't underdeveloped like an unconscious developed. Usually all their functions are developed. So often very skilled like early on in life because they have the origins to take on different challenges and situations as they come about. So basically, I think the easy way to sum it up is that they're very tribal people. They sort of they like being in numbers. Um, they Well, of course, it can vary for type because INTPs they usually like to stay by themselves, even if their subconscious develop. But they more so stick to like not as like I would say less open-minded and unconscious developed people. Just of course, it depends also on the slant of their soul that they're like angel's eye. Just change the nomenclature. Um, Hybrids or devil's eye it really depends on that person. But overall, just because their focus is on the upper stack, it really changes the traits they have. And then we have unconscious develop UD, and that's sort of you had a tough childhood, and you weren't really loved. You weren't loved in your childhood, and a lot of men are UD. A lot of men are UD, and this is something we'll touch base on later. Is actually it produces a pretty interesting dynamic that can really be, I think, very much exploited. Um, well, it actually that's nuanced too, but not being loved in your childhood produces unconscious developed people, and the traits with unconscious developed people is that they're very initiating. That's the opposite of credulity. Desecration. That's the opposite of flattery, breaking people down. Objectivity. Opposite of that is idolatry, idolizing people. And so just by not being loved in your childhood, you become this thing called unconscious developed, and that gives you a sort of, I guess it's sort of like a more edgier set of traits. Like unconscious developed people are pretty edgy people, and subconscious developed people are like pretty like they're like regular normal people. I think that's how they would come across in the collective unconscious. So hopefully now that everyone understands that, just that the edgy people are unconscious developed, basically weren't loved in their childhood. A lot of guys weren't. Um, it depends. You know, like guys, if they're an only child, a lot of them end up subconscious developed because they have the love from their parents, or maybe they're very like just very cute babies, very pretty, so they end up subconscious developed. Um, it can happen, but usually guys are unconscious developed because they're not given that love, especially if they have like a sister or like any female sibling, which of course is a sister. Uh, they probably not going to get that love and attention like their sister would, especially if they're an older child. And the thing is with older children too, it's like they're the first child, so your parents are like sort of experimenting, you know, if we're being fair and honest there. And that can produce a lot of like a tough childhood, just like, you know, your first time going horseback riding. I just actually, yeah, your first time going horseback riding or first time being a gymnast, it's probably pretty tough. But so how so we just looked at how it played out for men, but how it plays out for women in terms of their childhood and what it produces is sort of building up to the crux of this video. Maybe we'll get sort of like to the main title point a little later. But so women are usually always loved in their childhood for the most part. So this produces a lot of subconscious developed women. I would say 80% of women. I think it's 90%. It's been a while since I've actually. I take that back. I just today actually um, today I actually interacted with an unconscious developed woman. Okay, so but I would say 80% of women are subconscious developed. And again, this is when you're loved in childhood, and almost all women are loved in childhood because I guess everybody, not I guess, I think it's pretty obvious. Everybody loves, um, everybody loves like cute babies, especially the girls who are like born and created by God to be lovable, cute, feminine. They usually always end up subconscious developed, and that gives them, that sort of makes them like very much regular people, not that edgy. Um, they have that flattery, credulity, objectivity, and of course, this. I'm not trying to frame these people as sort of like very closed-minded or unintelligent people, but just because of the traits that they're given, they do like they naturally like their skill set really to break down situations compared to unconscious developed people, especially compared to their unconscious developed woman counterpart, which is quite interesting. It's quite interesting in how they differ. And so I guess we have that down. And I guess to build on that point, since we already covered the earlier point about men, a lot of men being unconsciously developed, that's sort of why we have a lot of problems in society because of the credulity of women. They just really listen to the government. They really listen to maybe whatever religion they were born into. They don't really have that critical thinking. With all due respect, I think that's pretty fair to say. They like the critical thinking there because of credulity to really initiate the opposite of credulity, the unconscious developed side, and really do their own research and sort of break it down there. And that makes these women really easy to be manipulated. But on the other side, they're also, I guess some would say, more feminine, since if you didn't have a tough childhood, if you had an easier life, um, I would say most men would consider that more feminine, just having a really easy life, just not taking a lot of shots or taking a lot of punches, metaphorically in life. I guess most men would consider that more feminine, but I think that's where I guess we're getting close to the crux of this video. That's where we sort of run into some problems there. So we have most men are unconscious developed, that are, I would say maybe 80% of guys, maybe 70. I've been ran into a lot of subconscious developed people, maybe 60%, but I would say majority unconscious developed, maybe 70, and with a dating pool of like 80% subconscious developed woman. And this actually, it really depends on like your sort of, your sort of experience in life. I say that because of course every guy likes a pretty girl. If I'm not mistaken, I think every guy out there wants a pretty girl. I know when I was like 14, 15, I had like the mindset like she had to be like intelligent. She had to be like I was probably lying to myself. I was probably lying to myself, trying to really understand myself. But maybe half of what I said, I might be doubling down on here. I might be going back to what I said when I was like 14 or 15. I think that's actually pretty interesting. But we have just we have an aspect of satisfaction and a sort of I would say a life virtue or a great wisdom from ISFJs and ENTPs is that people are most satisfied with people like them. And it's and of course I don't want to take it. Of course, let's see where I take this. Hopefully, it doesn't end up confusing. So that's a big problem there because ideally speaking, unconscious development, um, not ideally speaking, according to the principle of satisfaction, and I think most men um, will be happiest with a woman that is unconscious developed because if they're unconscious developed, and if you're subconscious developed, most men you'll be happiest with a subconscious developed woman. So it's actually extremely interesting dynamic from a point of satisfaction that if you're born in this life subconscious developed, you actually have a lot more happiness um, to some extent, especially with a subconscious developed guy, which I've never seen happen before. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen happen before, but really understands woman in game. Um, you can have double doses of happiness by having a woman that's subconscious developed and having a very beautiful woman that's extremely cool to have. But what happens to most unconscious developed men is that I think they sort of have the intelligence and understanding. Some men do, like maybe 10% of men do, and of course they're able to attract the subconscious developed women, which make up most of the population of women. But it doesn't really satisfy them completely with three aspects. So like if they're hyper righteous, or like they have the angel's eye, excuse me, they're they would be happiest with the angel's eye, unconscious developed, and very attractive woman. So there's like sort of three vectors that it takes to really satisfy that type of man. Or if the man's like a lower angel's eye, if he's a weaker angel's eye, he would be most satisfied with a woman that's sort of like maybe a weaker angel's eye, but also unconscious developed and attractive to his type, maybe his preference in females and women. Um, but we have a very big problem there for unconscious developed men in that most women don't have tough childhoods, especially in today's society. Most women don't have tough childhoods, um, but I think that's about to change, which I might dive into a little bit later. Most women don't have tough childhoods, so most women aren't unconscious developed. And I think at first glance this can seem very harmless to most people because most people in life, I think, they're very happy. Especially when you're very young, I think you're very happy just to talk to a pretty girl. But I think as we get older in life, and especially people with like lots of experience out there, I think sometimes, not sometimes, I think just maybe deep down, it's like I'm not sure if I said this before. Like if you never had flan, if you never had like creme brulee, um, if you never tasted it before, it's very hard to sort of understand just how good it is. And I think just because some men don't know that like maybe a very pretty unconscious developed woman exists, and maybe her tough childhood isn't enough to take away from her femininity. I think most men don't understand that they're missing out on potentially a lot of satisfaction. And I have to give credit to my mentor here. I think he mentioned that. I think he was the first. I think he was the first person ever to mention that probably unconscious development should end up with unconscious developed woman, and subconscious development should end up with unconscious developed woman. But we have another problem there, which is that usually subconscious developed women are more attracted to unconscious developed men because they have the intelligence, and with the not because of the intelligence, not always, not necessarily, but that intelligence allows them to really understand women better. And some people who truly do really really use that to their advantage. So we have these attraction dynamics that, like, women wants men with tough childhoods, and men want women with soft childhoods. But, well, not necessarily, but actually to some degree, mostly that's true. But we have a huge problem here in that no one is completely satisfied. Like, I don't want to ruin people's relationships. Maybe you're like 90. Okay, I don't want to ruin people's relationships. Maybe you're like 98% satisfied. If you find someone that you really love and care about, I won't take that away from that person. I want that. Yeah, I just yeah, this is not like advice to like completely cancel your relationship, but that 2% of satisfaction, I would say, maybe 10%, maybe 10% of satisfaction that people don't know about, because having the same development, matching development, ST, ST, UD, UD, I think can be a game changer. But in modern day reality, will this situation happen? I highly doubt it, because I think most of the men out there are unconscious developed. So it's hard for women to find a subconscious developed man that, in the first place, and hard to find one that she's attracted to. And most women out there are subconscious developed, so it's going to be hard for a man to find an unconscious developed woman. But I think if anyone out there wants happiness, like wants to get as close to the joy of heaven as possible, I highly recommend that you match, you sort of, you court your development. You court your development, basically you court your soul, court your soul slant. This is a nuance, this is an extra tidbit. And court your type. Maybe you like woman with blue hair. If that's your type, I guess that's your type. But this is sort of like the key aspect. Courting your development, I think, is going to unlock really new levels of happiness. And I think, and I think the most important part of this video is that, sort of, maybe one of the most important parts of the video, sort of for like the betterment of society, we sort of need individuals to be happy, because when you're happy, sort of a lot of amazing things when you're happy. It gives you a lot of energy to push through things that you don't necessarily want to do. It gives you a lot of energy to really push through. It gives you hope in life. So I guess that's another thing we'll touch on. So unconscious developed people experience hope. They had a tough childhood, but when they're subconscious focused, they experience hope. Or when they're upper stack focused, which I sort of prescribe more to stack theory than force, actually. I'm iffy on that, but I'm not sure I'm going to break that down here. And subconscious developed people have joy when they're subconscious focused, when they're really when they're sort of the subconscious focus is sort of like you're doing really well in life, and you're like really successful, and you're just in a really positive state of mind. There's nothing like no trauma or negative situation that brought you down, and you're just riding a high. You're like riding high on life, and I think that's a very fascinating dynamic. What is more beautiful, hope or joy? I think for women, I would say they find hope more beautiful because it's more masculine than joy, and for men, they would say they find joy more beautiful, because it's more feminine than hope. But that's the question I want to throw to all men: is hope, is joy truly more beautiful than hope? Is spring truly more beautiful than summer? I think it's a question I'm going to throw out there to all men, because I, with what I'm trying to say here, or what I'm trying to uh, suggest to just everyone in the audience, is that if you're an unconscious developed man, potentially courting a hope person, even though on paper they're less feminine because they had a tough childhood, as well as they have like sort of desecration, idolatry initiating. They sort of have that research, more solo, more edgy type of personality. I think it produces a lot of. I think it produces the most happiness, especially if that person is like your type of person, your soul slant. I believe it's going to produce a lot of happiness, and that happiness is going to, I think, maybe what I was trying to say earlier is that it's going to infect society with that hope. And I think society is going to completely change. And I think what happened, what made the 90s so beautiful is sort of this cycle that we had here. So we had the 1950s. I'm just going to assume that it was a joy generation of joy. And usually joy parents, subconscious developed parents, they produce hope children, because they sort of get more easily stressed than unconscious developed people, so they take it out on their kids, and the kids have a tough childhood, but it's no big deal. But they end up hope children, and these are the 70s actually. Was I off the mark? I might be off the mark here. We'll see. Or maybe I got one thing wrong. And the 90s kids should be the next joy generation. 90s kid joy generation. And the 90s children who had their children, 2010s, 2020s, they should be the next hope generation. I could be off. 2010s, 2020s, the hope generation. Unfortunately, a lot of 90s kids aren't having children, which is a shame. There's so much joy, in I don't have kids, but there's so much joy in just giving life. Like, we were all kids once. It's cool to pay it forward. It's biblical too. So I could be off in there, but so you have the 90s. We know the glorious generation of the 90s, pre 9/11. I guess the question maybe I can ask myself real quick: was the 90s more of a hope generation or a joy generation? I would say it's more of a hope generation. Okay, hope. So we have a hope generation. We have a joy generation. Then we have the 70s. I would say maybe more of a joy generation. The 90s was a hopeful generation. The 50s were amazing. It was very innocent. Everyone was very modest. So I think this is sort of the slant of how things goes. And so I guess the 2030s should be the next hope generation. And so according to this timeline, the 2030s have potential to be the next 90s, due to the next generation of hope, due to the next generation of unconscious developed people, which produce hope. And hope is something very important. It's something that people can cling on to in dark times. That's what really drives unconscious developed people. And I think definitely very much needed for society. I think hope, joy is really easy to decay. So we have the negative sides, something to touch on, maybe before we get to the summary or wrap up. Opposite of hope is despair. Opposite of joy is decay. And sort of right now we live in like a decay generation, like, because a lot of subconscious developed people, my age, Gen Z, a lot of subconscious developed people, I can feel the decay in the air, but it's not like when you bounce back to joy. It's hard to bounce back to joy when you have like stuff like the pandemic happening, immigrants being allowed into the country. It's very hard to change that, but we do have a more hopeful side because of President Trump, who is unconscious developed. I'm really sure about that, and that sort of combats the decay. We do have hope with our current president because of just his personality type, and yeah, decay is tough. Decay is really tough on society. It doesn't really feel good. Um, really lacking hope because lacking sort of, I guess, the unconscious developed people. Um, like the men, I feel like the men are sort of at despair. So we sort of live in a despair and a decay society. Not a lot of hope. Not a lot of hope unless you're like very young kid. There might be some joy and hope as an unconscious developed kid or a subconscious developed kid, but this is sort of this state of society. But I think we can really change to a hope society, which I find very beautiful because it's something different from heaven. Heaven is sort of a joy society, and hell is hell a despair society. And heaven is more of a joy society, a pure joy, and I suppose hell is more of a despair society. So this is extremely interesting dynamic. Unconscious developed people who experience despair in their lives and who don't really experience joy will truly get to experience joy for the first time. Subconscious developed people will have just experienced joy to the umpteenth degree, and subconscious developed people will feel despair for the first time, everlasting torment, of course, and unconscious developed people will sort of. This is why like a lot of unconscious developed people aren't scared of hell because like if they've been through a tough time in their life, they already know what despair feels like. So like, I don't think they're really scared of hell. It's just not fun to be in hell because there's no end. But I don't think they really have the fear like subconscious developed people. So another interesting dynamic there, but I guess the summary point, I'm not sure we got. I missed it. I feel like I wanna say something else. I feel like I want to say something else, but I guess connecting it back to the title point as prescription to happiness, I think really the person that has the most power to be happy in this life is probably an unconscious developed man because they have the knowledge, the skill set, and the power soon to be, or maybe they already do. And I recommend to a prescription to happiness to all unconscious developed men. Really try to talk to an unconscious developed woman. I think I truly think we've seen this. This archetype has played out in TV. If any unconscious developed guy is interested, a very great example of this is in this show Two and a Half Men. Charlie, who's an unconscious developed man, he sort of lives like the playboy womanizer lifestyle. Most of his life, he speaks to subconscious developed women, which is pretty much normal for all of society. That's how women usually end up. And the one when I think when Charlie seemed the happiest was when he was another righteous eye user. So this is another point to this is another point to that wisdom from satisfaction. He was most happiest with like the hyper righteous user, the hyper angel's eye, sort of like Charlie, which people find hard to believe. But Charlie Sheen, he is an angel's eye, or like a righteous eye user, which was Chelsea, and the unconscious developed Aunt Myra, and also the other angel's eye, Leah. But I think what's very interesting, I think Charlie's seen just pound for pound. I would say pound for pound the happiest with the unconscious developed INTJ Aunt Mara, which is very it's a great example of just unconscious developed people meeting an unconscious developed person. I think that's extremely fascinating, and I think all these examples go to show just really where true satisfaction comes from. So Chelsea's probably the prettiest of all of Charlie's girlfriends. Um, if I'm being, yes, that's my personal take. I think a lot of people like, yeah, she's the prettiest. Um, she had the she had the heart too. But just really all these vectors. We have human attractiveness. We have soul slant. We have unconscious development. We can sort of see a pattern to happiness here, which is pretty interesting compared to the guy. And I truly think just if more unconscious developed men chase unconscious developed women, that would produce a lot of hope for society. I think a lot of unconscious develop. Okay. This is my last point. This is the point I forgot. I think a lot of unconscious developed men are unhappy because you have a dating pool of with all the respect, not the sharpest subconscious developed women that are easy to manipulate by the government and society, and they just fall for things like pro-choice, letting immigrants into the country, which I might start to support. So people, just because I'm kind of tired of how things are going, I might just actually I'm already starting to support defund the cops, just because if women want immigrants to overflow the country, okay. So I think I'm sort of a Democrat at the moment. Uh, yeah, I'm sort of a Democrat at the moment. But back on topic, unconscious development are unhappy because they're dealing with people that are unlike them. Um, what does the Bible say? Very wicked, disloyal, um, very wicked and perverse generation. So they lack the soul slant, they lack the development, they lack the maybe the attractiveness too. I think women are a lot less attractive. This could be different. This is a whole different topic. Women are a lot less attractive than before. I think a woman put a lot less effort, especially in some areas for sure. And this is producing a lot of despair in society. And subconscious development, they're having a hard time getting getting dates or like being attracted towards one, like being they're struggling with dejection, which is producing decay. So as an unconscious development, I know this is happening. I know this despair is happening because if you're an unconscious developed guy, which I meet a lot of like unconscious developed guys, INTPs, a lot of INTPs out there. You can they're sort of like teeting on the edge of despair. If they really push themselves into the dating market, I think they might just fall deep into despair if you really push yourself for a bit. And subconscious development struggle with decay because they keep getting dejected or rejected by subconscious developed women who are chasing like the top points, not 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 actually point not I don't know how many knots 1% of unconscious. Well, there's some subconscious development that do not too bad, I think, but they're usually chasing unconscious development, and the thing is, even then, the unconscious development aren't really that attracted to these subconscious developed women because she's not. I guess she's not all that. She's not all that. So men and the women's side, mostly joy women are experiencing decay because they are lonely, and maybe the one guy they do like doesn't like them, so there's decay. And then we have a, okay, so just to make this clear, we have the unconscious developed woman, and a lot of unconscious developed women I meet aren't really on the edge, aren't really I don't really see them facing despair. So I think that's the last, maybe the last slivers of hope in society. I don't really see them despairing that much. I think they do have hope in society because of how much women can work in the workforce and develop as people. I think they may be the last strands of hope in society. So we have unconscious and subconscious developed women both in despair and decay, and we have subconscious developed women in decay. I would say in decay. Decay is not the worst. They still have. It's not the worst for society because their looks can, just their beauty brings lots of positive energy to society, and I don't think they realize it that much. But overall, they're in decay. And unconscious developed women, I don't really see a lot of them in despair. They're probably in the hopes on their minds. I don't know why. I mean, actually, I do know why, but yeah, it's nice to be hopeful. And so, sort of a prescription to this, like I said, a main title point, I think definitely we need unconscious developed men talking to more unconscious developed women. I think it's produced a lot of happiness for society, especially if you meet. So what happens? I think why guys are very dissuaded from talking to unconscious developed women is like something that makes you unconscious developed is like maybe being a little bit homey, like a little bit. What is the word? Like um, maybe not even looking like a tomboy, not even looking a little homey, just being maybe not even that pretty. Because I think all babies are cute, but I think it's really something happens in your childhood, how it's a childhood. Like maybe you're actually I don't want to go into all that, but just something happens in your childhood that really dissuades a lot of men. But it's not like the worst. It's not like the end of the world. I'm not even. I don't think it's even cope. But I do think for the betterment of society, we need we need unconscious development to change the hope. I think what is going to make them hopeful is talking to an unconscious developed woman because subconscious developed women are really lacking in lots of areas. Even if they had the beauty and the heart, it's still lacking. Subconscious developed men to get to joy. You need to really push with subconscious development women. Really need to push hard. Don't do online dating. Cold approach, strictly cold approach. Subconscious developed woman. I would say don't do online dating. Just go out. Subconscious development. So subconscious development. They have the hope. They have natural femininity because they had an easy childhood. So they're walking magnets of desire. So I would say go outside. Go outside more with friends. Go outside more. And unconscious developed women, if they want to be happy, I think what's interesting. I think why unconscious developed women are so happy is they always have unconscious developed men. So just yeah, just keep spend time with beauty people, which is already plenty of beauty guys up there. So that's sort of a prescription for happiness. I hope people really. I hope if maybe happiness cannot be drawn out as video, like in terms of you can't like take this advice into reality. I hope this really sort of explain what's really happening in society. We sort of live in I would say, what did I say earlier? I guess we live in the decay generation because we have joy people, the subconscious developed kids that the unconscious developed from the 90s, from the 80s and 90s people produced. And the next hope generation seems to be the 2030s, I think. So I think the 2030s is going to be a great time, especially if people, if really the culture changes on a macro scale, like just um, we start to, like, the 90s was really edgy, and edgy people are sort of unconsciously developed. And I'm not saying that like that's more evidence to the to the 90s being the hope generation. I really do assume it is, but we just really need to be more accepting of edgy people, especially edgy women, and I think we need to just connect. The edgy people need to connect together, like they did in the 90s. What did they do in the 90s? Start a rock band together, start a drum band together, just do stuff together, like start a group together, and that's gonna produce a lot of hope. And hopefully, the unconscious developed people with their bravery can inspire the subconscious developed people, and that's sort of how you produce a hope and joy society, which I think the 2030s can become if we all, with all the respect, if we all collectively throw myself in there, 100% throw myself in there, get our acts together, like 100%. That's me. I'm talking about myself there. Get ourselves together, and we can really just really bring back the 90s. I think the 30s might be the new 90s if everything goes according to plan. And I'm happy we're ending on a hopeful note. Happiness, joy, hope, unconscious develop, haha. And yeah, just really, men, like, try to be more willing, if maybe like be more willing to unconscious develop women, and subconscious develop people. It really there's so many fish in the sea. Really cold approach. Really like online dating. It's really hard. It's really hard for any guy. But cold approach is definitely gonna give you a lot of success, which I have talked about before. But we can touch on more later. And yeah, as always, stay safe, stay blessed, and here's to the 2030s, which I think might be pretty fun.